it would be nice, I think, if you go forward in some of your meetings to broaden that definition of recreation a little bit, to say, well, what can the town do to help the general health of the entire spectrum of
Well,
ages that we have?
yes, and I will tell you that we run into a fine line of, you can't on the one hand ask Little League to make sure they're maintaining all the fields, and then on the other hand, let every community group come in and use the fields at any given time.
I think Ken is.
Right, but I'm not necessarily on the fields. I mean, it could be an arranging a bowling outing for some
Gotcha.
folks who go someplace else, or maybe there's just getting out and walking at
Under
the
the
Glen Cove
auspices of-
recreation hours.
Under the auspices
I
of-
could maybe address that if it's all right.
Mm-hmm.
With the committee, with the timelines, the condition, with all the different various factors, yes, it appears as though this committee is hyper-focused on Marge Jones and Youth League sports, which is, for the time being, completely accurate. When they came on board with this committee, we had this glaring issue in front of us. So the kind of projected timeline has been and will be, get these fields safe and workable for the kids. Okay, we did that. Now, over the winter, let's make sure we construct policies and procedures and relationships that allow that to not happen again. And then once that's taken care of, then the committee can move on to the things that they should be doing, which is, okay, so how do we broaden out recreation? How, let's look at the RES site. Let's look at our other recreational things. What can we do to promote it? How can we have fundraisers? How can we get more people outdoors and active? And
I didn't mean to be critical at all of
No,
what
no,
the
no, no,
committee has
no.
done so far. I
It's
just
been
wanted to
part
throw
of
it
our
out there to say, okay,
conversation,
now
though,
you've
yeah.
done such a great job with this, let's
Right,
think
think-
what we can do in the future.
I think what Owen is saying is that we have been hyper-focused on getting those three
Yeah,
fields
as
safe and
appropriate.
usable. And so now we really have to build ourselves as a committee.
Yeah.
We need to write bylaws, and we need to come up with an annual budget, and, to present to you, like those kinds of things. So that is what we will be working on going forward.
Okay, great.
And yes, broadening what we can do as a recreation committee for the town as a whole, for sure.
Okay.
So a topic that came up at the Harbor Committee meeting the other day is over the long term, trying to get those enormous floats that are kind of in the middle of the Holiday by the Harbor. They're kind of like in the middle of everything. They get stored right there. Over the long term, they're trying to find a way to store those in another location. This is a total pipe dream, but somebody talked about a little ice rink there in where that location is. And I've seen that, I have no idea what they cost, but
Outdoor ice rinks are a joy.
I've seen it at, to maintain or
They are a
expense.
nightmare.
Main
Right,
Sport
I know.
always had one up for a
They have a
couple of years,
natural
didn't they?
pond.
How did that work out for them? They don't do it anymore,
Doesn't
do
Camden do
Camden
theirs
does
still?
one in the amphitheater.
Listen, I
do
think,
they?
I love the idea. I'm obviously at MRC, I'm very into ice. I love skating. I love skating outdoors.
But
I
it's
do
too
say
hard.
that
It's-
the weather is fickle,
Yeah.
and maintaining a skating surface that is remotely skatable and safe is a huge challenge. And I know a lot of families with backyard rinks, and I
One
envy
year.
them those 5 days a year when it's great. And then I hear them
Yeah.
bitching the rest of the time about
Okay.
all the time. And I'm not saying not to do it.
Yep.
I think it's a super idea, and we'll consider it.
I have had one at my house, and I agree with everything Barrett just said.
It's kind of like if you were silly enough to have built a DN. And,
Right.
3 days a year you can sail it on.
Yeah,
Well, when we were young, it actually froze. So.
Well, it's, different climate too.
Yeah.
But this coastal weather is just for
Just
ice
too-
rinks.
By the way,
I'm from
we
northern
have
Maine, so it would have been
great-
easy, but
We as a community have great partner organizations, whether it's the youth leagues themselves, the nonprofits, whether it's Penn Bay setting up the fitness trail, if anyone's walked on it recently at
Which-
Penn Bay Health Center.
Then-
While you're
yeah.
bringing that up, I drive by there a couple, 3-4 times a weekend probably. And every time I've been by there, there's cars there, and sometimes they're
And
li-
that's nice,
So it's getting used.
Yeah,
right.
Activity, it's
Where's the trail?
superb.
Yep.
And then we have the YMCA and MRC running all kinds of youth programming, and I think that this recreation committee should be reaching out to all
Yep.
of our community resources.
And pitch.
And
And the pitch.
what's interesting is if you look at the committee at the back of Barrett's application, you'll see that the committee is actually made up of a very diverse group of folks from a lot of locals that have kids in the youth leagues, are associated with the youth leagues, but also we've partnered in the committee form with Penn Bay and with the Midcoast Recreation Center. And so they're part of our discussion and sort of that outreach and broadening it to make sure that we're joining with people and really being more of a community organization.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for all the work. Thank you for being so patient.
Thank you.
Good job, thank you.
No, that's all right.
Staying the break.
No, we have to be here.
We'll take 5 here for a
Yep.
All right, we're back in session. Next item on the agenda is to set a date for the TIF workshop.
Tiffany, you and I.
Jamie is ready to go, according to Rick. Bill
This
and
is
I
when the lawyer's gonna come and talk to us about?
Well, he may be available on,
available by phone, but
Okay.
Jamie has done the research so that he can lay out what we have.
Gotcha.
That's the main, and the suggestion is December 7th at 4 PM, which Bill looked at Owen's graduate school schedule, and Rick is still around.
Yeah, I'm
December 7.
4 PM.
Does that work for everybody?
Dinner provided?
4 PM is a hard time for me, but I can
December
make it
7th.
happen.
What's better? Later?
Yeah. Later. No, it's fine.
Okay.
December 7th, 4
You
PM.
acquiesced on that pretty quickly.
No, you know what the truth is, it's not like there's a convenient time in my life, so.
Been there, done that. Okay, so we're set for December 7th, 4 PM.
There may be one, and I have to go back into my mind palace to see the actual date. There's a possibility that I would not be available on that date, but it does hinge on November 8th.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, that is new representative, kind of learn the
Orientation.
State House walk
Orientation.
around. But you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get
Okay,
there.
well, for now, we'll schedule it for that.
If you win, are you staying on the select board?
Yes, how many, yes.
Okay, let's,
Suffer the question.
next item is to think about changing our regular December meeting from the second Monday to the first Monday, which would be moving to December 5th versus December 12th. That accommodates Rick's vacation, also reduces the time between the November meeting, since we will not have a second meeting in November, I don't believe. So does anybody have any objection to moving that December meeting to the 5th?
No objection here.
This is a regular select board
Regular
meeting,
select board meeting
7
would be
PM.
December 5th instead of December 12th. Okay, do anybody want to make a
objection.
motion to that, just to make
I
it?
move that we reschedule the December select board meeting from December 12th to December 5th.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
the
4-0
things we
on
do
that
for
one.
you, Rick.
oh, I know, huh?
We really have to vote to set to change
Well,
the
that's
date
probably
of it?
don't necessarily, but it's not a bad idea. It makes it more formal. We now have a resolution that we need to adopt having to do with the infrastructure bonds. Apparently, the auditor has told us that we need to do that just to dot the i's and cross the t's. Nothing improper was done, but this makes things a little bit better. So I would await somebody making that motion.
I move that the select board delegates authority to the town treasurer to allocate $1,397,750 in bond proceeds relating to facility and right-of-way infrastructure projects approved at the November 4th, 2014 special town meeting to and among the specific projects identified in such authorization.
Second.
Have a motion to have a second. Any discussion? All in
So-
favor?
Well, I read over all this, it all seems to be legit. The only reason that I'm just pausing for half a second is the amount, just because it's a lot of money. That's the money we approved in 2014 by the voters, and this is just saying that,
Now that we have it, we can spend it on what we said we were going to spend it on,
okay,
basically.
cool.
And it's not adding, we don't add any new projects in or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, It's
This
just,
is
it's just
a
a
minor
housekeeping
procedural
item.
concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor of the motion? Okay. That passes unanimously.
Whilst we're talking about schedules, there's a possibility that I will not be here for the November 14th select board meeting.
Okay,
Instead, I'll be doing battle with EPA.
That is a meeting where we have the Harbor Committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
but
Not
we'll
that
yeah,
needs to.
okay. I would suggest you email the chair since he keeps the calendar.
I just noticed, I notified them, rather, no, I'll email them.
Okay, we've already taken care of wastewater, so we're on to liaison reports, I believe.
We might get out of here before midnight.
So, I'm trying to see if I have any notes from Bill on his, actually, you're on Midco Solid Waste, so you can do that one.
Did we already talk about the gut and that money?
The gut in the money, no.
Bill has it in his notes here about the $700,000.
Yeah, so basically, it was a plan that was apparently in the works for some time. It seemed to have gotten sidebarred because of our conversations with preferred vendors post 2018, and then seemed to pop up at our last meeting. So the short of it is, Sargent Corporation was the low bidder to again work on the gut. The gut is a portion between the north and the south quarry where water flows from the north quarry to the south quarry. The south quarry is the portion that's capped over that has some hazardous-ish material in it, and the
What is hazardous?
it's
Really
it's
bad
a,
stuff.
It's a landfill that we
Really
cap.
don't know what it is.
But because the water flows into it, we don't want it to spill out. So we pump the water out, and because it's a landfill water, we can't just pump that and dump it into the harbor. It goes to Camden's wastewater treatment facility. There is a huge price tag attached for that cost. Annually, we send a lot of money to Camden to pump this out. Filling the gut, and it's kind of interesting, and I won't go into the history, but basically we don't necessarily know why the gut was there. The north quarry goes down really deep, the south quarry goes down really deep. Yet there's a little passage between them that also went down just relatively deep, not hugely deep. Best assessment is it was for them to be able to not lift things all the way out of the north quarry to go to the south quarry where it could then go down to the harbor. They wanted to lift it up a minimal amount, so they quarried out a section. So the problem is that the water flows in between, constantly
Both
filling.
ways or only one way?
Just one way for the time being. If we were to pump down the north quarry and alter the water table there, it would then reverse flow.
Okay.
So what we're attempting to do, and we had attempted that 1 year, 2 years ago, with some sort of pressurized groutish system to fill in cracks and stuff. The whole end point is reduce the amount of water that's decent-ish water from the north quarry going to the bad-ish water in the south quarry. So the more we can stop that up, it only saves us money over the long term, because we have to pump that quarry out in perpetuity until something magical happens and we don't have to worry about that anymore. So there's a large upfront cost to it. However, if you project the timeline out, even if they're not able to fill 100% and stop 100% of the flow, because that's somewhat unrealistic, any bit that we stop that up and reduce the flow, over time those numbers will eventually, or those lines will eventually cross, and we'll see a cost saving on the upfront cost of the project versus pumping costs over time. That was, I thought, supposed to have taken place like a weekish ago.
Well, it's the,
It says in Bill's notes here that the work should be going on now.
Right.
yeah, they just sent out a notice saying, hey, if you don't need to come to the dump, don't.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, so.
So when I signed the warrant last time, they hadn't started
days.
construction on it.
And I
They
think-
should be starting very soon.
Yeah,
They
I
have
think
to
they're working on
reorient
that.
some of the cans. They have to reorient traffic flow, because basically the gut is right underneath where you put the number 2s in your tin into the large cans there. That should, what was the timeline on that they'd be doing it? It's not a huge amount
No,
of
it seems
time.
to be about
Couple
10
weeks.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple weeks of time.
Do you have a sense for what the order of magnitude is on how long it takes to get back to break even? This is like $700,000 or something, right?
$100,000.
If I remember correctly, which I often don't, we spend what, over $100,000 a
Yeah,
year
it's quite
pumping
a-
that thing out?
It is. We spend a lot of money in just pumping that water.
And Jim, over time, has found ways to reduce the amount that we pump out by trying to stop things up. However, all of the efforts have fallen short of the overall goal of some significant reduction. So it's not, the gut does extend for a decent distance. It goes from one quarry to another. The whole plan is on the North Quarry side, dig up, expose as much of the gut as we can in a small section of it, clear everything out, drive metal sheet pylons strategically, and then fill them all full of concrete, creating a impermeable barrier between the North Quarry and the South Quarry. How effective it will be is yet to be determined. Sorry, we asked a lot of questions about what could we do to ensure that we're blocking more up? What can we do to gather more information so you can engineer this better for success? There's not a lot of unknowns. There are some unknowns. The quality of the rock they've
Is there
done.
any chance the flow isn't going to reduce?
No.
This is hydrological pressure, sure there is a chance.
No. But there's not a chance that the flow won't reduce. We will reduce the flow. It's the magnitude. Are we going to be 80% reduction? 85%?
I mean, you're totally certain there's not like another channel somewhere leading from basin A to basin B.
Here's an interesting thing. Jim, when we first started going into this, which was many, many years ago, Jim went and had to go through a lot of historical data because the gut was filled back up with crap and then capped off for us to put the transfer station there. So the only thing barring tearing everything up and having a huge project is looking at really old pictures to get a best assessment of what it looked like when it was exposed. So there are some unknowns. They've done a lot of test boring in and around where they're going to be doing the work. They're not overly concerned about what they will find down there. But again, it's not will we reduce the flow, it's how much will we reduce the flow. So on a long enough timeline, and the timelines that you're looking for is somewhere, is it
It's just
is
7
it
to 10
years
that's
to
fine.
break even? Is
I
it
wanna-
12 years to break even in cost savings? So the only other thing to really add to that was there's a closure fund. The closure fund has 2-point-something million in it. That's enough money to cover this project. The only thing that we haven't quite figured out, and because of the time-sensitive nature of it and getting it done before wintertime and kind of an off-season when the tourists aren't here, is had a train of thought, lost a train of thought. Oh, bonding. Do we bond the cost of this project out retroactively or not? Do we take the money from the closure fund and then try to budget to fill back in that over time? Or do we take the money out of the closure fund, pay for it, and then bond out that amount to throw back into the closure fund so we always still have that money in there?
Can you even do that? I mean, that's.
And
like
that was a weird,
technically
so the whole
retroactively
meeting was
fund
weird.
something?
That we got given an agenda, and I asked some questions about this during the meeting because I was like, oh, I know I'm new to this game, but we got this agenda like 5 days ago, and you're asking us tonight to vote on approving $700,000 for a project that starts in 2 weeks, and we have the money to pay for it, but we haven't fully fleshed out how we fill this money back in. So the whole thing was a little weird.
In fairness, it's the conversation about the gut and what to do there, and there's been several different approaches looked at, has been going on ever since I've been here.
Yeah.
So it's been going on for longer than 3 years. It's been part of the discussion. As Owen said, though, it kind of got sidetracked with the whole discussion on the
Ecomain fiber.
Ecomain fiberite thing. But it has been part of the conversation for longer than I've been here.
Basically, the first meeting that we had post Ecomain fiberite conversations, this was brought up.
So not to.
What does
like,
that have to do with how we fund it, though?
There's we have money set aside to fund it. But money's been set aside for this for quite some time.
But that money also has to pay for other things,
Right.
too.
That money's been, I mean, the way you described it, it's been set aside in case we have to close.
Well,
the
when-
facility.
The closure fund.
When
yeah.
we close it, but the closing it doesn't happen for many years from now.
But no matter what, the goal is ultimately is if you can stop the water flow into the North Quarry, that eventually the water that's in the North Quarry will clean up enough so that it doesn't need to be treated forever. If you can control the water going through, that's the water that has the contaminants in it, and that you may be able to get it so that the water is clean enough that it doesn't need to go through the wastewater treatment system. But that remains to be seen, I think.
So it's one of those things that, yeah, it's weird, but because of the in perpetuity factor here
Right.
with that South Quarry and it's already being capped over, that not necessarily barring all costs, but there's not very many scenarios under which putting money into this effort isn't a good idea. The only reason that I had concerns was being on that board and not necessarily feeling like I had a huge amount of lead time on evaluating what I thought was a very high ticket item. But it all does make sense. It's just the financing of the project post this
So what is the option that's not bonding to replenish the funds?
is
don't-
budgeting over time, but
Yeah.
upping the amount that we put into that closure fund, because we put money into that closure fund every year, but it's just not, we would have to boost that up
Okay.
or
If
bond
I
out.
remember correctly, that closure fund needs $10 million in it. Is that,
I can't answer
I
that.
don't know.
there's a 20-year plan. I could be wrong, but it's, I'm probably wrong. But anyway,
In
so
preparation
we
of-
do have to keep the funds going into that for
Yep.
the closing date.
In preparation of our upcoming meetings with Midco Solid Waste, I'm the chair of the finance committee, just because they wanted me to sign the warrants. So it's something that Jim and I have talked about, is that I'm not overly well versed in the finances of this whole facility. So going into budget season, we should be having a lot more of those conversations, and I'll be able to fill in the blanks at that point.
So timeline, it's October 24th to November 8th is the period of most excavation and associated hauling will occur. And it's also when the steel sheet will be driven into the gut. So basically between now and November 8th is the heaviest period of this activity.
It's totally normal that we didn't bond for this work?
Timing.
All of a sudden we had to do it.
And the fact that we have money there that we can use for it, and it
Timing.
would cover. It's like the sewer conversation that we just
Well,
had.
that closing fund is all about mitigating the environmental issues at the site, and this is, clearly falls within that
Yeah.
scope.
Okay.
Further liaison reports?
Pathways Committee met. We drafted up a letter that we sent in regards to the sidewalk to nowhere.
Saw that, yeah.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you. So that went live. We had some good conversations. Oh, and not that it really applies to us, but with Camden Route 1 North, they were able to reduce the speed limit in the affected zone by 5 miles an hour, which is actually a big deal for the folks in that strip, because a 5 mile an hour reduction on speed brought in the sightline parameters for MDOT, which keeps a lot of the stone walls, trees that had to have been removed, people's septic systems that would have to have been removed. So that's a good thing for Camden, not necessarily for us. However, it's an interesting concept to be aware of moving forward. And the one last thing, maybe I'll talk about it offline. I ran across a lady. She pays a landlord, and her house she's in the trailer park, and she said she doesn't feel like she has any recourse for the landlord. But that's something I need to research. And it's basically, does the town have a role in enforcing some sort of codes? I asked her if she was Section 8. She said, I'm not, because I know if you receive Section 8 funds, the state has the facility. But it's a conversation for someone who can answer these things. It's not necessarily a liaison.
Okay. Maybe talk to Jamie or something.
Yeah, I got to talk, because I saw her house, and it's a trailer, and it's in extremely poor condition, and she pays a landlord every month, and that landlord does absolutely nothing, and the house is none of us would want to live in it.
I mean, we adopted the building code, but I don't think that is retractive to.
And that's the thing, is
existing
it's within our,
construction.
it's within
But
our town.
if it's in life safety,
If it rises to like a,
health and life
Scott,
safety, yeah.
Okay. Because I told her I'd look into it.
Yeah,
Because
gotta be
it seems a legit thing. And I guess the question, because I said, ma'am, do you own this? And she said, no. So someone else owns it. Someone else owns a lot of those trailers in the trailer park closer to the Rockland end of our town. And apparently it's been a reoccurring theme with the owner of that park, who also owns a substantial amount of the trailers in it.
Jamie and Scott.
Yep. Thank you.
so you guys heard from, the Conservation Commission as recently as I did, because they were here in front of us. We're going to hear from the Harbor Committee on the 14th, but we did have a meeting with the new, what do you call them, the alternate members. We had our first meeting, which had a significant, meaningful proposal from Gartley and Dorsey and Rockport Marine about increasing the size of the Rockport Marine travel lift bay. They're getting a new and larger travel lift. So the Harbor Committee voted to support that proposal to, I guess, the planning board.
As I say, they'll have to go to the planning board
Yep.
for approval, I'm sure. They may have to, I don't know.
It struck me as something that would be difficult to take issue with, but not understanding the, environmental concerns about actually executing the work. But Ad hoc Library Planning Committee has suspended meetings. They are engaged in door knocking and various other mechanisms of communicating with the public and trying to get people out to vote and support the library.
Thank you for that CAD drawing of the Marine Park and
Oh, yeah.
that'll be very helpful going forward. We have something.
I don't know if there are other committees that have graphical representation like that, but
That was it's very helpful having that drawing.
Let me see. Planning board meets on Wednesday. The zoning board hasn't met. The Rockport Opera House Committee had an extended, by design, an extended meeting just the other day. And the Opera House Committee wanted to this board, reaffirm their belief in the legitimacy of the schedule of fees. So that, and this was specifically with what do we do when very nice organizations like Waldorf and other people come and say to this board, can we get a break in half or to zero or something like this? So there'll be something in paper that comes to this board, but it basically said the Rockport Opera House Committee wants to reaffirm this price schedule as it exists, and any exceptions should be made with the input from the rental agent and the town manager. And we sort of left it there so that ultimately, we didn't want to say, oh, and if you really have a problem with that, go to the select board. So, so that was that. And we talked about a lot of fees. The other thing is that presently this room, if an organization wants to utilize the streaming capability, we have nothing published for fees, so guess what? They get it for free. Except that it's very clear that you have to pay the technicians that money, so that's still a pass-through for the town. So we discussed some figures for that. We're going to do a little bit of research and get back to the committee. Will get back to this board with a new fee schedule. Well, it'll have a new insert in it for this equipment. And that was the bulk of the Opera House discussion.
Tech Committee?
Tech Committee, I don't know. Oh, we have a meeting. John's calling for a meeting coming up.
Right.
Thank you for reminding me. There's a meeting coming up. They have been meeting with providers, but hopefully there wasn't one in the middle there that I missed. But
No, there wasn't.
yeah, okay. So There's one coming up.
Once upon a time, I think maybe the tech committee was going to pick up the thread about engaging with the public by other means.
Yes, that's important to a portion of the tech committee that has lain fallow for a while, waiting for the atmosphere to change, and for them to come back in the fold. We very much want them to come back in the fold, but there's sort, in that sense, there's sort of two sets of expertise on the board, and that set of expertise are willing and able to come back in and start working on things like that. So that serves as a good reminder.
And they're due to come before the board, I think, the end of January.
Right, by design with a summary of all their conversations with the various providers.
Cemetery Committee has not met, but we're due to come before. Yeah, we're due to come before the select board in the December meeting, so hopefully sometime after the election, we can hear back from the attorneys on that other issue and get a meeting together sometime in maybe the second half of November. Ordinance review, we had the workshop here. I ran across the chair the other day, and we're getting ready to get going again, so that will probably start up soon. Legacy Rockport has not met. I need to rattle their cage a little bit. Ambulance review, based on our earlier conversation before the meeting, we need to get that group together sooner rather than later, it sounds like.
What is it?
Ambulance review.
Ambulance review.
That's the first I've heard of these people.
It's, there's
Oh, it's because us old timers.
two members from each town on, the 4 towns on the committee. It was established when we went with Northeast Mobile Health so that we could review the progress and how things were going to make sure that we didn't get any surprises like we did with Camden First Aid at the end there. And apparently over the last few weeks, there have been some fairly serious issues which we need to address.
Are you at liberty to discuss those issues?
It's probably not the place to discuss them at this
Okay.
point.
So at any rate, we have to get that committee together. And the only other thing I'll say is and Bill's notes here, since he's not here, he did have a note on the Parks Committee. Hasn't met, or it
They're trying to set up a meeting for,
says October 19th, but that's already passed. on
no,
here.
they're shooting for Wednesday, October 26th at 3:30.
Okay, so that's this week coming.
Probably gonna be their last one. They usually take a hiatus.
Maybe, I
during
mean,
the winter.
he did, Bill notes the letter from the Garden Club from the Belfast Citizen about the food truck. It was complaining about that. Did that come up at the Harbor Committee at all?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to. It did come up.
The painter who wanted to have a clear shot of the.
It was somebody from Belfast
This is-
who claimed they came down they wanted to have a lunch in the harbor and
they
have a
objected to
picnic, and
the
they didn't like the truck where it was parked
proximity
or
of the
something.
food truck to the
Andre the Citizen.
to Andre.
Right.
And we did talk about it, actually, not at length, but we talked about it for a while, and the fact that that facility is heavily used and enjoyed by a large number of people, and our assessment is that you're never going to get the happy letters,
That's true.
but that people are by and large very happy about.
Yeah, I mean, I've only
Having
heard
that.
positive comments about the truck down there. so-
Delicious
But it's
tacos.
worth, I mean, it's probably worth having, just look at it and say, is there a way it could be better? If this is the best place for it, then so state, and we move on.
Yeah, so I actually think
Plus, the
that's a
infrastructure's there
conversation
for it.
for Mike, and probably between you and Mike. And my understanding is that there are some challenges associated with power supply, and that is the place.
That's where we put, one of the reasons we put the power supply where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. Why is Mike our go-to harbor guy? We have a harbor master. Mike is Public Works.
She's the harbor master.
Yeah, but
and-
she's got. I mean, Abby's not going to tell you where the complications are around bringing power to a.
She's on the water, he's on the land.
No, but I mean,
Well, but
she's got access to qualified electricians. She's
Right, she's
just a
not.
harbor master, right?
It's like Mike with
She
facilities.
doesn't have access to qualified electricians. We don't, in Public Works, we don't have a qualified electrician. He contracts out just like the harbor
But he's
master
the one that
would.
gets the work done, right? I mean, if you're going to move the power supply, she's gonna
Buildings
do
and
it through
grounds
Mike,
typically
right?
fall under Public Works.
Okay.
For the management of buildings and grounds. We do the same thing with the town office building and here, all the work that goes on in the town office building would, you know, it had been more of the work was handled internally, but it just makes sense that you have, you know, the Public Works Department, Buildings and Grounds, handles maintenance of this building, handles maintenance of, the town office building, the harbor master building and the grounds.
It's a
I mean, the
good
more-
answer. I
The
just
more
figured it was
peculiar
a
thing, I
question.
think, is why isn't parks more involved in the marine park? But
They are to some extent.
That's been between the Harbor Committee and the Parks Committee over the
Yeah.
years, that there's been a little. bit
careful.
of-
everybody
that's
said
what-
there doesn't seem to be any tension. Everybody's sort of like, well, if it's not going well, we can look at it again. But
Where do we stand on the conversation of weddings in the park? I know,
I was gonna ask
Yeah.
that too. Thank you.
It's on my list to do. It's
Okay.
on my to-do list, but haven't done yet, to develop a policy on. and bring
so
that
I
back to-
told someone, I actually have heard about this issue kind of a lot. It's one of the
Yeah, me too.
kind of
Yeah, the
like,
weddings, I think, is a,
people are much angrier about it than I realized.
exactly.
Yeah.
The wedding issue is one that certainly needs to be addressed. I think
So,
a lot more people
I
are
told
concerned about
members
it.
of the public that we were not taking reservations for the time being.
Right,
Is that
it's
your
on-
statement?
right.
Okay.
The only other thing, I'm trying to read my notes here, my printer failed, but it looks like there's a business after hours at Flatbreads. I think it's the first Wednesday in November,
Yeah, I can check,
so
check
if
that
you
out.
want pizza, Chamber of Commerce event.
And then there's also, you should have gotten the listing for, the, chamber.
Oh, the
The
dinner,
event?
yeah. I haven't thought
And
about
you're right, it does seem like we just did this, because we did
just did
just
this.
this in the spring. They're changing it from going,
yeah.
when they merged the two chambers, one chamber had a dinner one time and one chamber had a dinner the other time, so that they were they had tried to merge them together, and this is the year they're gonna merge it together, so we ended up with two of them in the same year.
If I remember correctly, Mr. Parker wore that same jacket at that event.
Not that anybody's checking.
It's a jacket that I own.
It's a good
I
jacket.
could wear my tuxedo
November,
jacket.
it's November 9th.
and my,
it. Okay,
My
is that-
reticulated
anybody
pipeline.
have anything else? If not,
November 9th.
Yes.
Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
So be it.
Second.
all in favor?
Do it.
You're
This is
adjourned at
ZBA
10 minutes
meeting
after
that night.
10. You two